offer it at all. So this is interesting, and that does not include some of the private schools. The highest revenue college football programs, and you can see from top to bottom, there's a ton of the teams, but you're not going to see, I don't think you see TCU, you don't see Baylor, you're not going to see, for example, Duke or Stanford. But these are, and this, of course, a lot of it has to do with the television money they're getting. The college football playoff money is not even included in this yet. And then also the fact they have huge stadiums, lots of attendance, ticket sales, etc. So there we are with the top schools in college football revenue, according to college football, the college football report.
Look at Utah there at $92 million as they come in already the highest earning Big 12 team and well ahead of Kansas State, who is the second on the list. Texas Tech. I'm sorry. Ahead of Tech, who is second on the list at $80 million. So very interesting. Well, I guess we got to count Texas and Oklahoma in that. But as far as teams in the conference this morning.
No, they're not. I mean, they just had the whole celebration. They're in the SEC now. So, I mean, they earned that in the Big 12. But, yeah, I mean, it's cool to look at. There's some surprises in there. Utah being as high as they are, that's great for them, for the league. To be above, Florida State, A&M programs like that. Now, I don't know every little devil in the detail other than just this is top revenue, so I guess donations and things like that. But, yeah, Texas Tech in a very strong spot as well. Arizona's in there, Colorado there towards the bottom, both of those schools. And there's K-State, as you mentioned, over there in the 20s. So, not bad. I mean, you figure this list would be dominated by like all SEC and Big Ten teams, and it pretty much is at the top. But, I do wonder what all goes into this. Is that West Virginia down at the bottom? Yeah, West Virginia's down there as well in the lower part. But Oregon State, does that count? What exactly? So where's all this coming from? Because I feel like they wouldn't be one of the top revenues. But
No. It's from 2023. And remember, the Pac-12 had a pretty good year when it comes to revenue distribution. So that's
okay. Yeah, Washington State's on there as well. So I mean, great for them. They had such a good year; they're not together anymore. But that's Arizona. So quite a few teams, more than I would expect there to be on this list. So that's cool. Texas is number one on these types of lists every time, I feel like, but maybe they have a bit more company than you'd anticipate. But, there's no sport, certainly, that loves talking about how much money they make and then crying about how much money they have to spend more than college football. So I'm sure this is, don't look at this when we say we have to, cut back on softball cleats or whatever we might have to do one day. But, that's pretty cool to look at.
Well, look, college football now is a big, gigantic corporate entity, and it'd just be like, we here at Johnson & Johnson have recorded a record year. By the way, we're canceling your dental plan, but things are great here. No more sick days, but it's great. Look at these record profits. Our CEO just got a third jet. There is one team not on this list.
Oh, by the way, these vaccines now have doubled in price.
All those, absolutely. Of the top 50, and unless I've missed them, I'm a little surprised that Notre Dame's not on this list.
Private.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, but...
Yeah, there's no TCU. There's no privates
Stanford,
whatsoever.
Duke,
No USC.
So we have no idea.
I remember, and this is back...
They don't have to tell us.
This is like 8 or 9, 10 years ago. I remember asking Ian McCall what his budget was based on athletics at the time. And remember, football is going to be the main draw there or the main expense and revenue producer. This is 8 to 10 years ago, and their budget was in the 80 million range. Now, that was everything. And I know that probably is in the 100 million or more. I reached out to, I sent a text to Mac Rhodes, didn't hear back from him, but I would think that they're in the mix there as far as some of the private schools, and especially Notre Dame. I would think TCU, Baylor, and a few of the other private schools also, that BYU, that could be involved.
Well, it's interesting. There's a $140 million difference between Texas and Mississippi State, which is the start and finish of that list. So, you can talk about the haves and the have-nots, but there's some that are just the super haves, and it doesn't matter what conference they're in. But this doesn't even count SEC payouts yet. So you can only imagine. But it's like, at some point,
or the college football playoffs.
Yeah, or the college football playoff, or potentially get into that thing. So I mean, Texas is clearly in the lead and well on their way to being, over $200 million. And number 50, you've got Mississippi State, who's in the same conference, who's got $41 million. Now, I know there's a lot of things that go into this, but that's just kind of crazy to see the disparity within that league, because you'd think that they all are making $150 million the way that it's talked about, but that's not necessarily the case. They do get good TV payouts, but there's a lot more to it than just that as far as support goes. So, like we've been saying, Texas is the right school at the right place, the right time, potentially. And, if we don't look back on this time period, I feel like of this next 5-10 years, and I know where they are now, Sears Cup, or excuse me, whatever it's called. What's the Sears Cup now? It's the Sears
Learfield Cup.
Sears Cup. Learfield Cup.
The Director's Cup is what I call it.
Yeah.
But if they don't have, some national championship appearances and things like that, given just all the stuff at their disposal now, that would be shocking, because they're really well set up. But as you see, Georgia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Bama, Auburn, LSU, all right around there as well. So they got plenty of competition. And that is what I am fascinated by, is just to see more of that playing field, where it's not so one-sided as it felt in the Big 12 at times with 2 and then everybody else. It's more of like 10 and then, the rest of them. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic.
But there is a huge separation, as you mentioned, from 5 or 6 programs in the SEC, with 2 more coming in that are going to be near the top or at the top. Garrett, let's go to McLean Stadium first. McLean Stadium, we knew this. This is more not about them, because we showed you Texas Tech and what they've done with their stadium, among others. When you think about the money being spent and revenue and expenses and all of that, McLean Stadium was built and opened in 2014. So just over about a decade later, and they're doing a bunch of renovations with the lighting, the scoreboard. They're adding some, you could see the suites underneath the scoreboard. That's new. And they're giving it a little bit of a touch-up, which they needed to do. And some, updates, stat boards, etc., things like that, which goes to, you see what Kansas is doing. Everybody is improving their stadium. None of these teams that are outside of the SEC and Big Ten are giving up. At least it doesn't appear that way. They're spending more, and they're not spending this money to update this so they can end up being relegated out of a national championship picture. This just happens to be Baylor, but I've mentioned Tech and KU and much more. Everybody's all in. It's just a matter of how long can they continue to spend. And then what would be the next thing that they also generate to make it even better with the bells and whistles outside of NIL and also the revenue sharing. So, and one thing that was desperately needed, not desperately, but I had heard this before, the broadcast booths and some of the stuff they have, which is to the right of where we sit at McLean Stadium up in the upper level, they needed to be upgraded, updated technologically and better for ESPN Plus and things like that, and they're getting that done.
Yeah, then everybody now that I don't blame anybody for trying to do ESPN Plus on the shoestring budget they were doing it, because they didn't. You never really kind of know when it's going to spin your way that you're all of a sudden going to be an ESPN Plus game. Although there's some when you're playing Jacksonville State, that's the ESPN Plus game, right? But even still, after what happened at Texas State, which is not Baylor's fault, but just kind of showed you, if you're going to produce these games, and I do think ESPN needs to help them out with that a little bit, but if they're going to produce these games, they need to have the best equipment. They need to have more than just student workers. I'm all for student workers doing them, because that's how you're going to learn and get better in the business. But most of the time, and I think people that when they listen and oh my God, I watched this game and it was terrible, the sound was bad and this, you've got 2 actual paid adults in the room, and the rest of the staff are kids trying to learn. So, those people who are producing it are herding these cats anyway and teaching on the fly. So, you need to spend more budget on having, I think it needs to be like a 1-to-4 ratio, where if you have 20 student employees, you need to have 5 people that each have 4 under their.
Do it for a living.
That do it for a living.
Do
it for a living, because it's only going to make everything better. It's going to make the kids better. It's going to make them better. It's going to make the broadcast better. So, I think they need to do that.
I just think it's overdue. I mean, technology advances pretty quick, and so you don't have LED boards. Everybody's got LED boards now. You had the same screen you had when you opened the place. It's been over 10 years. That technology is different now. So I think that's just naturally keeping things updated. And there's, certainly elements of the video control room and the fact that you're going to be doing a lot of broadcast, and you want to have the right equipment, the right space to put on the best broadcast that you can, and to have students or whoever it is that the controls, have the best at their disposal to put on the best product that they can, because we have seen what it can be when it's lackluster. I think, that stadium's still new in the grand scheme of things, but it's over a decade old at this point. So it's time to probably start doing some things to, put on a new, put on some new lipstick on there, and and just keep things nice and fresh. So that makes sense with the video boards and all the rest of it, and that's good. It's not Kansas redoing their entire stadium for $500 million, but that's what they needed to do. This is just putting more into the investment that you made over a decade ago that's paid huge dividends for you so far, and that you hope will continue to pay huge dividends for you for another decade and more.
Katie Rader, remember Cody Campbell telling you guys that you'll see a slowdown in facilities across the country as schools start to have to pay players. That's why get it in now. Get it in now before that whatever $20 million or so will be delegated.
Craig is sighing. I was about to sigh too. They are always going to have the money. Maybe Louisiana Monroe won't, but if you have a P in front of that 4 and you're one of those schools, you're going to have the money.
What I said was it's slow down.
Yeah.
I didn't say they wouldn't do that anymore. Yeah. And what also he said is that there's a lot of people trying to get all that in now. That doesn't mean they won't update, tweak, and even maybe add to it. But you notice a lot of those stadium renovations are happening right now. Slow down doesn't mean you're turning off the faucet.
Yeah, I think there will be a slowdown in just the excess and the unnecessary stuff, not so much the actual upkeep of things. Like your LED boards, everybody's going to have those if they don't already at some point. The TV screens, you're always going to keep those updated and find a way to do that. But there just might not be as much of the excessive stuff or the unnecessary stuff that you see moving forward, because it's just harder to explain that money away when you do need it allocated elsewhere. But you also do need to keep your facilities updated, because you're still going to be bringing tens of thousands of fans in there, multiple Saturdays every fall. So it's going to be a little bit different, but there will still be things here and there.
By the way, Grant Tapp, the legend, icon, Baylor football coach, will join us today in an interview we recorded after the show yesterday at 4 on the anniversary of the 50th year of the Miracle on the Brazos in 1974, the win against Texas. And a backstory to that I didn't know about until somebody sent me a note. We'll have him today at 4 o'clock. Jake Hatch on Utah State and what happened with Blake Anderson and company. He'll join us in the 5 o'clock hour. Now, Paul does a top 5 based on basically almost every topic you can discuss. But I saw this today, Big 12 pressure rankings when it comes to coaches. Now, I think you can flip this up and down based on really what do you consider pressure? If you don't win, you're gone, or you have high expectations and you better win because of the fact that people think you're going to win. So here's the list. Dave Aranda at 1. That's not a surprise. We all know that Dave Aranda is leading into this after a couple of years where things fell apart in 22, and then last year the disastrous 3-9. Dion at 2.
Dion has to start living up to the hype.
It's second year.
Yeah, but he's created this hype. He and his offspring have created some hype. So I think there's not pressure from Colorado, but there's pressure to meet the expectations from the outside world of, hey, we're watching you on TV all the time. Give us a real reason to other than you.
They did for 1 month.
Yeah. So do it for the whole, do it when you get into the conference. I think they'll be better. But I do think, Dave Aranda, it goes without saying that he has the most pressure. He's the only coach on this list that is in a for sure prove it year. And Dion's not in a prove it year at all, but he's got to match the hype that he built, not the rest of the world. He's got to match the hype that he built.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree on Dave Aranda. I think this is kind of pointless because 2 through 16 probably aren't going anywhere. and I know this isn't hot seat necessarily, but, as far as pressure, like, I guess you've got to fill out the list, but everybody's got pressure. Like, every coach
That's
entering.
why I said there's different angles.
Every coach has, freaking Steve Sarkisian's got pressure to win this year.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, like, this is fun off-season fodder, but I just don't feel like the urgency with 97% of this list. I think Paul's right. Deion's on no hot seat. I know this doesn't say hot seat. This says pressure. He's got pressure nationally from the public to win, but he doesn't give two S's about that, nor does Colorado, and unless there's just a miserable season where off the field stuff were to start popping off and he starts going off on administration or something like that, like, everything's hunky-dory there. They're fine with him as long as they have him and hope that they can take it to a different level. But, yeah, that pressure that is being mentioned here is all from the outside public. I think the only real pressure on here is Dave Aranda, because he's very much a guy that's actually on a hot seat. I don't know that Kalani Sitake's on a hot seat because of just his BYU background and all those things. I do think there's a pressure for him to win, though. And then I just think there's varying degrees of, like, yeah, you need to reach a certain level as the head coach of this program that's expected of you, like every coach in America has to reach a certain level. And so there is that automatic pressure that's built in. But, like, does Willie Fitz have any pressure really whatsoever? No, absolutely not. Does Kyle Whittingham?
No.
Absolutely not.
Wait a minute, but they're at the bottom. That means there's a reason.
And then you have to, like, he has to give them numbers, but he could put 10 through 16 as all 16.
Yeah, like, that's what I mean. It's just that you
I
got to rank
I think
them.
you can go even higher than that.
Right, that's what I'm saying is, like, so pressure is, I get where you're coming from, but I do think it's like, this is like a two-person list, really.
Okay, well, either one of you, let's try this and have fun with it. Okay, let's start. We know Aranda, we said Sanders. Kalani Sitake, Hans Olsen last week saying that, he needs to... He needs to kind of give us a spark.
Just mentioned him,
okay, he's got to give a spark. I don't think it needs to be earth-shattering, but...
Yeah, no, but there needs to be a pulse.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the name of the coach, and either one of you in like one sentence tell me what would that pressure possibly be. Scott Satterfield.
Showing that you can be better in year two after you lost the greatest coach in your history in Luke Fickell.
Sonny Dykes, Craig.
Just show that the playoff run a couple years ago wasn't some fluke and that you are actually not regressing.
Neil Brown.
Do it again. Do it again. Do what you did. Improve. You proved everybody wrong a year ago. Continue to prove those doubters that called him lucky wrong again.
Yeah, I would actually say there's no chance in hell he should be behind Sonny Dykes, who made a college football playoff 2 years ago. I mean, like, he had a great year last year, but, I mean, if anybody were to work their way into more pressure, I feel Neil Brown would be most likely to be that guy versus Sonny Dykes.
If they slip back to 5 and 7.
That's the pressure. He has the pressure that, like I said, you can't regress, that you've got to show that you're, like, moving forward. Now, that might mean matching the win total from last year or – maybe a game less, but that can depend on the style that you're doing. I don't think he's just like scot-free for life now because they had one good year, but I definitely don't think he's got less pressure than Sonny Dykes or, Deion Sanders, really.
Here's what I think about.
We're going way past one sentence.
Yeah. Neil Brown swam out of the rapids.
Okay.
But he's still in the river.
Okay.
Like, he's still floating down.
Brent Brennan, I don't see how he could have any
zero.
Zero. Yeah.
Gus Malzahn. They love him.
Yeah, him.
There's things they don't like as far as like the execution last year and things like that, but in no way, shape, or form is he in any danger of being on a hot seat.
Okay, yeah. Kenny Dillingham, I can't imagine any hot seats with him.
Just proving that you're getting better.
All right, Mike Gundy is as solid as anybody else on this list. Yeah,
none. Zero. I mean, he's just just. The only danger there is, like, is this the year he finally snaps and is just like, all right, I'm done, and I want to be done with college football because I don't like it anymore. I just don't want to live in Stillwater anymore. Like, barring something totally unforeseen like that would just be out of nowhere. Yeah, there's absolutely zero pressure on Mike Gundy
nobody is more consistent and yet always available when it comes to these lists that he's got some pressure on him. No. He's almost tenured. If anything,
he's tenured.
If his name pops up,
that's how his contract works.
Chris Kleiman,
zero.
Kyle Whittingham,
zero.
Joey McGuire,
he should be higher. I mean, if we're talking about pressure, I do think there's a little bit of like, all right, you've been off to a good start, but we want to see more. We want to see that we're actually climbing and not just sitting in a 7-8 range, but that we're competing for the Big 12. But, like, is he in any danger of being fired? Absolutely not.
All right.
Although he should definitely not be behind Chris Kleiman or Chris Kleiman or Kyle Whittingham
Well, no,
or Mike Gundy.
Gundy,
yeah,
Kleiman,
like that's
and Whittingham.
that's
yeah.
silly.
All right, Matt Campbell.
0.
He's not going anywhere. They could have a year where they get back. Like if they have a year where they don't get to a bowl game, he's still not going
Yeah,
anywhere.
there's absolutely zero pressure whatsoever. There's there's pressure and there's expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Like so, I just view the wording differently. I think that's where the problem, or not problem, but I just think that's where the discrepancy is here. Is just viewing the wording a little bit differently and what it means.
We've already mentioned Fritz, Lance Leipold.
Yeah, 0.
He owns.
Hey.
Well, Bill Self owns it,
Look.
but he's in the same mansion.
In the new stadium, I'm sure they're clearing out space for his eventual statue. Like, oh, what are we going to put here? Nothing right now. But eventually, that's where Lance is going.
All right, let's get to the Ty Hawkins news, Garrett. We'll pop to that one. Paul, you guys, Craig saw this one. Here's a TCU football commit and a hell of a quarterback who has flipped to SMU. Billy Embody, who we've had on this show, covers SMU and LSU. This is a big deal for SMU. Wasn't it their quarterback, Keelan Russell, who ended up saying that he's flipping to Alabama? He was that good. And so SMU gets Ty Hawkins, at least the commitment at this particular time.
Yeah, they lost Keelan Russell, and that was a big loss for them. But kudos to the Mustangs and Rhett Lashley for bouncing back. And this is, I know for Billy Embody, he was pulling out some receipts from TCU fans that were messing with him, I guess, a couple of weeks back in regards to this. And now he's got the actual, here you go, here it happened, and he's flipped to SMU. So that's got to be a fun feeling for Billy to play around with on social media and whatnot, and SMU fans for that matter. But yeah, that's a sign of the times, I think, and just where we are with SMU and their commitment and their push and their backing, and their entry into the ACC, that they're more of a player than they were prior to this year. If they were just an American team, maybe they still in this NIL era flip a player like Ty Hawkins, but I think there's no doubt the ACC matters here, and the ability to sell them on, hey, Florida State's rolling into town the year, and we're going to play Clemson, and we're going to play North Carolina, and so on and so forth. Now, granted, we know that that's on wobbly foundation to some extent, but he could play his whole career for all we know, and those teams are all still in the league. Like, that's the thing, is you can speculate all you want, but for right now, that's what they can sell, because that's what the reality is, and we know Florida State's rolling into town, so they're going to be able to show that off and be able to use that as more of a recruiting pitch, and I think you're seeing that start to work for them. It's like, yeah, we're on a different level now than we used to be, and we are on a similar footing to TCU, to Baylor, to Texas Tech compared to, the last 30 years. So they've got a good combination. Talking about Texas, like right school, right place, right era to really thrive and take off even farther than they ever have before. And SMU seems to be another team that could, be in that same boat, not reaching the same heights, but like be in a different level than they've been in a really long time. And I think you're seeing signs of that.
The new rules have given them a chance to compete, and also the icing on top is the fact that they're in a conference that they can say they're going to play the teams you mentioned.
Yeah.
We have David